Now, I was also trying to figure out how to say why I love journalism so much, And there were so many reasons that I finally got reduced to putting them into 10 top reasons like David Letterman. I have to warn you, though, these are not so funny, and they're not so short. But it's a device. What can I say? Right, okay. I would say that 10 is that it's a portable profession because you can do it almost anywhere. I once interviewed circus people who told me that the sword swallower is the aristocrat and the most envied person in the circus world because he or she, although I have to say I've never seen a female sword swallower, doesn't need a high wire or elephants or even a tent. The sword swallower can work wherever, and it's possible to attract a crowd. And I think the same is true for us, and even more so now that technology has made it possible for us to put words in so many, many different places. We don't need the stock market or a movie studio or a laboratory. We are the sword swallowers of the professional world. 9. Being a journalist is like getting paid for learning. Yes. Don't you feel that? Yes. You can follow your ahas, you can follow your interests, it's just such an enormous luxury. Of course, we have to take editors with us, and right. And of course, especially today, we have to figure out how to eat. I mean, it's a little complicated, but okay. It's basically, we hope we're getting paid to learn. 8, writing also allows you to say what you wish you'd said on the spot. You can go home and write your mot d'escalier, that you write. Right. For instance, the other day, I spent 3 hours of waiting on the tarmac in a plane, and finally the pilot offered us a free movie to pacify us. And the young man next to me said, "I don't watch chick flicks." I don't know if I could have changed him on the spot, but I went home and described both chick flicks, which are more dialogue than special effects, more relationships than chases, more suspense about how people live than how they die, right? And then I thought, how about prick flicks? For all the movies that have spent more time glorifying World War II as the last time we could be both violent and right. Do you know, I understand that we have now spent more money making films and television series about World War II than was spent on World War II. Okay. And all the shoot-em-ups with no dialogue to translate overseas, which is very appealing, and everything with more interest in death than life. Not to mention with women usually younger and less clothed than men. So, if I am aided by being guided toward chick flicks, why not aid fans toward prick flicks by giving them this? It's perfectly helpful, don't you think? Okay. 7. So, actually, in this way, I came to understand the journalistic politics of adjectives. The superior thing doesn't need an adjective, and the inferior one does. Have you ever noticed that? Thus, there are chick flicks, and all the rest are just movies. There are Hispanic leaders, but not Anglo leaders. There are women novelists, but not male novelists. There are gay soldiers, but not heterosexual soldiers. You may say that the majority doesn't need an adjective, but in about 20 minutes, the majority of this country is no longer going to be European American. So I think that all of us better learn to start saying European American. 6, unlike academics, journalists have to be understandable. How revolutionary is that? And that is huge, huge when you think about it. I personally am going to put up signs on all the roads leading to Harvard and Yale that say, "Beware deconstruction ahead." Five, journalists have to meet deadlines. Now, I have to be frank, I'm still working on this since I was always working for magazines. My deadlines were weekly or monthly, and I never really got the hang of deadlines. As a result, I have a book that's so overdue that I have reached what I think of as the Studs Terkel school of deadlines. He asked me once about a book he was working on, and would I come and talk to him about it. And I said, "Yeah, what's your deadline?" And he said, me, I'm my deadline. So I'm getting there, so right in. 4, writing about issues and people who seem to be having a negative effect, even I find that pride of authorship takes over. And I regret this, but I feel I have to be accurate. It may be more pride than empathy, but it does help us to see other views. And I do think that when we write, we, out of pride of authorship, out of, whatever the motive, it really forces us to look carefully at what we don't agree with. And that is very, very precious, and it may be the only profession in which this is truly the case. 3, we can make the invisible visible. As one random example, we can talk about the feminization of poverty, and we have, and that was a new phrase which helped us to understand the economic situation in this country. But we could also begin to name the masculinization of wealth, because without naming it, we're not going to solve the feminization of poverty. Actually, once in an editorial meeting at Ms. Magazine, we were looking for all the famous women who had slept their way to wealth and power. We kept hearing that this was a big possibility. And we thought, well, by any means necessary, let's see if we can find people who have actually done this. And it turned out that they had maybe slept their way to a nice house and charge cards. But who slept their way to real power were sons-in-law. And we made a list of everything that, families that had the disaster of not having a son. Oh my God, so they had to find a son-in-law and it was just fascinating how long this list was. So I think we need to think about the masculinization of wealth, and all the daughters who get, nice clothes, and charge cards, but everything is controlled by trustees. I'm happy to say that women are rebelling now against this, and there are all kinds of groups of women of inherited wealth who are in rebellion against this and who are giving their money in large quantities to other women's groups. There's Women Moving Millions. There's, there are a lot of such groups. I also, here's something. I think that my next to the peak reason is that we as journalists figure out some sort of very basic questions. For instance, why are we stuck in a place that tells us that there are 2 sides to every question? There are 5 sides to some. There are 12 to others. Why do we divide it into 2? It's a big part of the reason that the press is sometimes disliked by the public at large, because it's about hostility, it's about conflict, it's like a court battle. And it turns out that cultures that don't divide themselves so obsessively into masculine and feminine also don't divide all their issues into 2 sides. And there are cultures and countries where important questions always have at least 3 sides to make that point, or even more. So I think, our profession causes us to look more deeply at the reason for the rules of our own profession and to figure out why it is and does it need to stay that way. For a long time, we had the who, what, where, why, when inverted pyramid rule, remember that? And that turned out to be a function of the telegraph machine, because before the telegraph machine, people had told their stories in essay form, short story form. The whole goal of Churchill as a journalist or other, was to put the reader in the place where the journalist was. But with the advent of the telegraph machine in a linear form, people who were not writers had to be taught to be writers and reporters, and so there was this formula. And now it's not linear anymore, so now we can use all of these essay and short story, all the kinds of forms we need in order to convey an entire human experience to the reader. And I think that the first reason I'm glad to be a journalist is that there are other journalists, and there are amazing, smart, incredible people who are producing the biggest ahas. There's a woman named Valerie Hudson who has written a book called Sex and World Peace, published by Columbia Press just a couple of months ago. And she has gone beyond what we knew before, which was that in original and tribal cultures, the degree of violence was predicted by the polarization of gender roles. So, if there was extreme polarization of masculine and feminine, it indicated violence in the society. But they have looked at 100 modern cultures, modern nations, and at great length, but very readable length, I might add, have pointed out that the single greatest determinant of whether a country is violent within itself, within its borders, or is militarily violent toward other countries, is not poverty, is not the presence or absence of natural resources, is not religion, is not even degree of democracy. It's violence against females. Not because female life is any more valuable than male life, of course not, it's not, but because that kind of violence is what we experience earliest, and we get the subject-object, masculine, feminine, controlled paradigm, and we come to think that it's inevitable or natural, or it feels like home. And, is this part of our foreign policy? No. But because of Valerie Hudson, a journalist and an academic, and the three other people who wrote this book, we are going to be able to look at the roots of violence. We are going to be able to say, why is it that this globe is no longer, as Tony was pointing out, that it's not equally divided anymore. Half the globe is no longer female. It's like 107 males to 100 because of female infanticide and because of, in our own country, domestic violence. If you added up all of the people who were killed in 9/11 and in Afghanistan and in Iraq, more women than that total have been killed since 9/11, murdered by their husbands and boyfriends. So, it is, I think, a chance, because of all the people who are writing so brilliantly and reporting so brilliantly now, we are beginning to see that there is no such thing as women's issues and men's issues. It is all united. It isn't that women are going to do a better job of looking after this world if we do it by ourselves. No, it's because we understand now that if a group of men make a decision by themselves, they are more likely to choose the most aggressive solution, even if it's wrong. And the group of women by ourselves are more likely to choose the most conciliatory solution, even if it's wrong. But if we have a group that really represents humanity as it exists, we are much more likely to have a full range of alternatives, and even more important, not to have the pattern on which all human violence and that isn't in direct self-defense and all human violence is based. So we have the power to say these things. You know, we have the power to change consciousness. We have the power to change language. How great is that? It is discouraging, I know, when it seems like the money and the power are elsewhere, but we have the power to change consciousness. And that is the single most important thing, because that is the sense of the possible and future. So I hope that we stick together and provide a community for each other in supporting this kind of exploration and purpose. I'm very, very, very proud to be in this room, and I hope that this is just the beginning of many subversive organizing cells to come. Thank you.
Gloria, thank you so much.